what actually happens if something big and dangerous is found and it's actually within the United States. And we find out that, as I like to put it, this is a place where the food chain runs both ways.
On this episode of the Cryptid Crew podcast, I have the privilege of introducing author, writer, and researcher, Matt Bille. Matt, thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you very much for the invite, Mark.
Absolutely. Glad you could make it on. And we got some things in common, of course, and cryptozoology is one of them. And I've got right here in front of me, Books and Beasts, a cryptozoologist library that you have written. Very thorough, by the way. It has quite a bit.
I missed a couple.
Did you really?
I missed the Thunderbirds.
Thunderbirds. Okay.
Yeah.
That's a very interesting subject, especially in the Native American folklore.
Yes, it is.
Yes. Matt, I'll tell you what, let's tell the listeners what got you interested initially in cryptozoology.
Well, I was one of those kids who was just fascinated with animals from the start, reading everything I could find. And of course, some of that included, this was, growing up in the 60s and 70s, some of that included the early books on the Yeti and the Loch Ness Monster and Bigfoot. And it's such a fascinating topic that I've stayed up with it. I've gotten a little more skeptical about some animals over the years, but the topic never ceases to fascinate me, and the people involved always fascinate me. So I wrote my first book in 95, Rumors of Existence, pulling together information on newly discovered animals, maybe extinct animals, and mystery animals. And I did one like it in 06, and then I went on to other things for a while. I ran a newsletter for 5 years, Exotic Zoology, and then we came up to a couple of years ago, and I realized there was no bibliography, no published bibliography. There are some online ones, but there isn't a book people can pick up and say, what are the best books on X? And so I wrote that one.
Yes, it has like we said earlier, quite a bit of cryptids in it, anything from lizard man to Bigfoot to Nessie. And let me ask you this, Matt, what is one of your favorite cryptids that you have written about?
Well, let's see. Probably some of the lesser known ones, the Yari or Australian marsupial tiger cat seems to me quite a plausible animal. I'm interested in recent extinctions like thylacine and the ivory-billed woodpecker. And I have a special fondness for whatever it is that lives in Lake Iliamna, Alaska, often described as a giant fish, like a giant sturgeon or something, because that's one of the few that I put money down that there is some creature behind it. Orang pendek in Sumatra is interesting too, that ape the size of a small human.
Yes, they had an episode on finding Bigfoot several years ago. I'm not sure if you've watched it. They were investigating that particular cryptid.
I don't recall the episode.
Yeah, it was an hour-long episode. And it's interesting, too. They did some interviews, and typically in those episodes, they would have town halls, when they went to certain states or cities to interview people. And on this particular episode, you can tell that the people there telling the story have nothing to gain for it because most of them live in such a rural area. And social media then was not anything close to what it is now. So there was nothing to gain for them to tell their story.
Interesting.
Yes. Going back to Lake Iliamna in Alaska, that that's a very interesting subject. That creature, very plausible.
It's almost always described as a giant fish. It may, in fact, be an undocumented strain of sturgeon that grows, white sturgeon that grows very big. But sturgeon have been seen in the lake but never caught. And if there are some that get to 20 feet plus, that by itself is a very interesting discovery. And it goes back, forever to Alaska Native reports and then early white settlers and so forth, and has continued up to the present day. I've talked to some people who report it. It's a very interesting mystery. I think there's something to it.
Yes, I'm not sure if you've seen this, but you probably have. Being interested in animals that have gone extinct or possibly are extinct, and the show, I think it used to be on the Travel Channel, Extinct or Alive, with Forrest Galante, I believe
Yes,
is
I
his
watched
name.
that.
But either way, he has done some episodes going back to I guess it is the thylacine that I'm thinking about. The tiger, is it the Tasmanian tiger, if I'm not mistaken? But there was evidence of it up until a few decades ago, and it's very interesting.
It may have it certainly did not die out at the official extinction date of 1936. There's too much good stuff after that. It may currently be extinct. Tiny possibility.
Right. Matt, let me transition into something else, and we'll go back to your book. But how do you think AI has played a factor in cryptozoology? Has it been?
I'm sorry, what is
AI? And the reason I'm asking that is there's so many videos online now on the internet of things that you used to would have stopped and analyzed it or looked at it multiple times, and now you see something and you just scroll by it because you don't know if it's real or not.
Yeah, it's a real problem because now you've got any genuine stuff is pretty much buried. Now, some of the AI stuff looks too clean, too shiny, but there is so much of it you can't look at it all. It's a huge problem, I think, for anybody who wants to do this. Of course, if you find real evidence of a cryptid, you're not going to put it on the internet. You're going to contact somebody, a network or a museum or someone who can authenticate it.
Correct. Yeah, it's really disheartening, honestly, to see, I guess, all the garbage on there. And I hate to say it like that, but it really is. And it just saturates the topic because that's not evidence. The AI isn't. But, it just saturates everything. And it's just so much to look at and scroll through that a lot of people don't have time to do that. So going back, let me ask you this, Matt. Going back to your childhood or growing up and being interested in books and so forth, which topic was your favorite, and were you the one to sit down, probably like me, if something came on TV, any type of documentary, you were there watching it?
Absolutely. I remember all the Jacques Cousteau specials. Remember those?
Yes.
Watched every one of those. Watched early documentaries like Bigfoot, Man or Beast. I still remember some of those. I was very fortunate. I had parents who made sure there were books and library cards available, and so I was able to learn as much as you could back then. When I wrote my first book in 95, some of it was still from physically going through archives of century-old magazines looking for bits and pieces because they hadn't all been digitized and indexed yet. And it was really cool. I really enjoyed doing that.
Yeah. Researching is probably one of the neatest parts of doing this, which I know you go in depth quite a bit more than I do, especially writing these books. But to find an article or something that you know is dated and read about it, and actually read some of the different languages that's used. For example, um, hairy man or wood ape or
Oh,
wood devil
yes.
referring to Bigfoot, or in an
Yeah.
article, and because some things were not explained like it is today, and I'm gonna call it pop culture type of
Yes.
era. What's one of the neatest finds that you have come across while doing some research?
Let's see. It was great to find old books, some of the old Abominable Snowman books in particular. I found a little book on the Yeti that had been translated, I believe, from Chinese or Tibetan in a pile in the main library in Los Angeles. And I stood there and fed, I was just passing through, so I fed dimes into the Xerox machine, and got most of it for my own use back before you could just punch on the internet. It was a great deal of interesting stuff. There was some old colonial stuff from Africa from the 30s, uh, some old stuff from South America. And it was really cool because back then, some of what I put in my first book, it hadn't been published before because nobody had come across that particular bit of data. That was a lot of fun.
What What do you think about the Yeti, and can it survive those elevations?
There are, as I understand it, some forested valleys in the Himalayas that are almost untrodden. The book is called Something Hidden Behind the Ranges, I think, that goes into a lot of that. Uh, so the Yeti, it's got many fewer sightings than Bigfoot, much less evidence, but at the same time, uh, it probably has a better chance of hiding just because it's a hard creature to look for. You could imagine sort of a cold adapted, maybe an orangutan relative. It's not, we don't have good evidence for it, but it's except testimonial, but it's not impossible. It would sure be fun if it was there.
Yes, it's that's the part about the subject I like, is the fun of it, the mystery of it. And I've asked this question a few times lately on the episode. What if, and I'm going to say Bigfoot or Sasquatch,
Mhm.
was brought to science, a body? Would that take the mystery out of it for you? And how would it change things for the general public?
Well, I'd be thrilled because I have opined the last few years that, it probably does not exist, and I even put up $10,000 to be added to whatever riches the person finding it and describing it in a scientific journal gets. I called it the Matt Bille Challenge. It's on my blog somewhere. Uh, I would absolutely be thrilled to have to pay out. It would mean two things. One, of course, is the discovery of a fascinating, important creature. And the other is that if we could miss Sasquatch, with all the people who've looked for it in North America, that gives legitimacy to the cryptozoological idea that there may be more large animals hiding out that we haven't seen yet or haven't proved yet. It would be absolutely fascinating. No, I don't think it would take out the mystery. Uh, for the rest of my life, I'd be reading everything new published on it.
Yes, for sure. It would change. Well, I believe it would change. Another guest had mentioned this at one time. Your national parks, your state parks.
Mhm.
Um, I'm not sure if it would deter people from going back to the parks, or you would get another, I guess, a wave of people interested in the subject going to do research or investigate or explore.
I think the latter. I think the federal government would immediately have to, close off in some way the probable range to keep people from flooding in who don't have expertise or wilderness skills or whatever. It could just, get overwhelmed and people could get hurt and so forth. And I think they'd have to, some years ago when they thought they had a good ivory-billed woodpecker video, the Smithsonian and the Nature Conservancy very quietly protected a big stretch of possible habitat. And you would have to, that's your precedent, I think. That's what would happen here.
Was that in Louisiana? Do you
I
know?
believe that sighting was in Arkansas.
Arkansas. Okay.
The ivory bill is interesting because, there has been so much expended on it. Of course, as opposed to Sasquatch, it's a lot smaller, but it's also a lot more visible. So it's a fascinating question of whether everybody's wrong or there might still be a few somewhere.
Matt, I want to ask you this. A friend of mine, he sent me a video of some of his farm animals gathered together and as being, it seemed to be scared or they were wanting to be protected on his farm, small farm. And I did some analyzing on the video, and I am about 99% sure in an oak tree I spotted a black, I'm going to say black panther. I don't know what else it could be. What do you think about that particular cryptid?
What state was that?
North Carolina.
Someone published a private book. A guy named Humphreys published a book called Panthers of the Coastal Plain, where he had 160 panther sightings in North Carolina. And even though we have never caught a truly black panther or puma or whatever, my father is quite sure he saw one in the woods in Maine in the 1950s. And Dad was a very experienced hunter, interested in animals, and just a rock solid type of guy. And he was quite sure that he'd seen one. So certainly I think it's possible.
Was his a daytime sighting?
Yeah, it was. He said it looked a little smaller than the black leopards he saw in circuses in rural Maine, but way too big to be anything else.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Yeah, this particular one I was looking at seemed to be fairly large, but it's hard to tell because of the distance that the tree is and away from his spotlight and camera. Initially, he did not see it, but it had a yellowish greenish eye reflection and pretty. Let me ask you this about your dad's sighting: was it a road crossing, or was he hunting, or?
It crossed a rural road in front of him, going through the woods in Maine. I don't recall him giving me anything more on a location. Dad is deceased now, but he was always sure he saw one, and I was convinced that he had it right.
Sure. Matt, summer thrillers are a thing. It seems like every year. And I'm talking about movies.
Yep. Jaws,
yes,
for example.
I saw that in the background. And Jaws, Jurassic Park movies are popular this time of year. Is Jaws a megalodon?
No, they were pretty clear, and Benchley writes it in the book. He writes that the great white was a direct descendant of megalodon, which we now know isn't true. It belonged to a different shark genus and I think family. And I doubt that we still have megalodons. You're talking about something that likes shallow waters, and I'm sure we'd have some videos or some recent teeth. But it's a fascinating subject to read about.
Yes, it really is. I guess it came out in the mid 70s or late 70s, the first movie.
Yeah, 70s, for the book.
Yeah, that movie's had some impact on vacationers.
Well, it did, and Peter Benchley became a shark conservationist and was sorry that he had led people to fear it so much, and thus increased the number of sharks who were killed.
Very interesting. I did not know that.
Yes.
Let me ask you this, Matt. Favorite summer movie,
Gosh,
Jaws or
movies in
Jurassic Park?
Jaws is a superb film. It's one of those few films where there aren't any wasted scenes. Everything is there for a reason. And that's kind of astonishing when you consider there were 3 or 4 screenwriters collaborating. So Spielberg really pulled one off there. My second would be, tied with it would be the original Jurassic Park, because it was such a leap in depiction of dinosaurs, even if they didn't get everything right, that we know now. It was just, sort of mind-blowing the first time you saw it.
Yes. The original one is my favorite.
Yes, definitely.
1993 or 94, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
It was very well made, by the way, especially for the time period. Um, let's go back to your book,
Sure.
Books and Beast, a cryptozoologist library. And I want to ask you this, Matt. How long did it take you from beginning to end to finish the book?
That was about an 18-month project. It wasn't the only thing I was doing. I was still working in consulting at the time and doing some other things. But there are 400 book reviews in it. I read every one of those books. I bought probably 100 over the course of it that I hadn't seen previously reviewed or seen or whatever. And I promised my wife I would resell some of them, which I did. But also the public libraries here in Colorado Springs are very good, so that was helpful. And it was a fascinating exercise in reading and seeing what the literature was really like. If you note, there's 4 sections. There's there's an upfront section where it's kind of a basic list of like the top 12 cryptozoology books. And then there's a cryptozoology section, a zoology section, and a section on other sciences. Because if you're seriously going to investigate cryptids, then you have to have some knowledge of ecology, paleontology, folklore, and some other things about the types of animal you may be looking for. So I tried to collect books that gave a really good background, but were written for a broad audience. So I've got a lot of those, and then at the end I put in a section on crypto fiction and one on odds and ends books.
And speaking of crypto fiction, you had mentioned you're working on a new book. Is that correct? Or new project?
Right. Well, I sold it. Blackstone Publishing in February will bring out a book called Apex Predator that takes a look at Lake Iliamna, because I mentioned earlier that it's probably a strain of sturgeon, but of course it's fun to ask what if it's not. And I love creature fiction, even bad creature fiction. I'm very fond of it, and most people, even in the good stuff, tend to skip over the science and sometimes the characterization. And so I thought, well, I ought to stop complaining about that and write one that I like, where I think I've got all the science right. And I looked at the possibilities, and Iliamna was the only place in the world I could find where it was very remote, very big, very deep, and had a small human population, but a very large food supply population. And so I hopped on back onto researching Lake Iliamna, and I'll spent 10 years on it by the time it comes out, in and out of other projects, of course. But it's been through an awful lot of drafts. I've got about 24 scientists and Alaska natives and area inhabitants to thank for it. I think that cryptozoologists will really like some Easter eggs and will like the treatment of, okay, what actually happens if something big and dangerous is found and it's actually within the United States. And we find out that, as I like to put it, this is a place where the food chain runs both ways.
Sounds fascinating. When can we expect that to be
That'll be
published?
out in February, all
February.
formats.
Okay.
And it was interesting. It was a little hard to sell to publishers because they like one niche, like creature horror. And here I was doing a book where human drama is the core of it, and the creature is the flashpoint that makes people decide. Our protagonist, who's very reserved and psychologically damaged, he's got to decide whether he's willing to risk his life to save an ancient predator. And so it was a fascinating thing to explore. And you work on the science. A fellow named Pat Poe, who was the salmon biologist for the lake, I asked him if it could support a bigger predator. And he said, I don't know why there isn't one. And I was like, yeah, there we go.
Very good answer from him. I'm sure that was exactly what you wanted to hear.
Yes, of course. Not a secret anymore. I've posted it. That we went back to the Devonian. If you're familiar with Dunkleosteus, the armored predator of that period, the apex predator. Here's a warm and fuzzy version of it. It's amazing that you could make the most deadly thing that ever swam into a fuzzy plush toy, but people are good at that. And they supposedly died out at the end of the Devonian, but I worked with quite a few paleontologists, including through a fortuitous meeting, Robert Bacher at one point, and you can draw a plausible map of where they were without us finding more recent fossils that could have supported a relic population. It was really fun to put that chain together. So readers, I hope, will love the way the protagonists of the novel start working this out.
How big was the creature supposed to be?
We used to think about 10 meters. A fellow named Russell Engelman, who's been helping me, published a revision that shrunk it down to maybe 5 meters. So it could be shorter than the biggest great whites, but it was a sort of a linebacker build fish. It was a blocky, heavy type fish, and that's all armor on the head and the forepart of the body. Armor up to 2 inches thick. And the teeth were not actual teeth. They were blades of bone that grew out of the jawbone. The late Richard Ellis called it a giant staple remover, and it must have been absolutely terrifying in life to look at this thing. And so it was a lot of fun to figure out, okay, how's it evolved? How does it behave now? How did it adapt? We cut some of that out because the publishers didn't want, the science to overwhelm the rest of the story. But I kept enough in there that I think science-minded cryptozoologists and other readers will really enjoy working at seeing the way it worked out.
So looking forward to that. And I'll put a link in the description as well for the listeners to check out your books now, where they can find them.
Thank you very much.
No problem at all. I noticed in your book as well, Matt, that you had stuff from Ken Gerhardt, Lyle Blackburn, and Adam Davies, which are three of my favorite cryptozoologists, I guess you would call them, or researchers or investigators. And the Monsters of Texas, you had written a little bit about that in your book as well, and that's a fascinating subject to me. I have a friend of mine that lives in close to San Antonio that does some research, and there's some interesting reports and things that come out of Texas.
And some of those you look at and you say, well, where does it live? Where does it hide? That kind of thing. But there's no question that people have really been startled and, think they've seen something extraordinary.
Yes, no doubt. No doubt about that. What do you think about? I think it was 2015 or 16. I'm gonna see if I can pull it up. It's a older video back before I believe AI was a big thing, and I'm gonna show it to you, and you tell me what you think.
Sure.
See, hang on one second. Here we go.
That's a model. That's a radio controlled model.
Is it?
Look at the stiffness. The wing panels are solid pieces.
I'll try to run that one more time.
That's my opinion anyway.
Okay. Let's see. Let me try it one more time, Matt, because this video has fascinated me.
Yeah, it only bends at one point at the middle of the wing, and the rest of it just stays almost perfectly still. So
Right.
my opinion is that you're looking at a very nice bit of radio controlled modeling. I don't know for sure, but that's
Right.
my guess.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that hurt my feelings. No, I'm just kidding. I
Right.
wanted that to be real, but when I first saw that, I thought it's several years ago, and I was like, "Oh wow!" Supposedly it was recorded in Idaho, I believe.
I can't believe that pterosaurs of any sort have actually survived without any fossils or whatever, even though they were kind of fragile. Uh, Birds are another thing. I talked to a guy, I made a blog entry on it, from Arizona Fish and Game, who was certain his plane almost collided with what looked like a golden eagle that he thought was uh, 12 or 15 feet across.
Oh wow!
And, it's hard for anybody, even experts, to estimate the size of things in the air. But there's quite a few reports of that sort that are intriguing.
Yes, it is. I had a guest on a few episodes ago from Tennessee, eastern part of Tennessee, that had a nighttime sighting of some sort of large bird, and he did not know what it was. He just described it as something with a giant wingspan, and it was at night. But yeah, these things, like you said, the mystery of this and the reports keep you going.
I'm always on the lookout for interesting things. There are cryptids like that where it's not obvious that it should be there without us having fossils and stuff. But at the same time, there are a few interesting reports. That's one. The wolf-like carnivores in Canada and Alaska, Wahila is one name for them, that dip down into the. There's a handful of reports dipping down into the United States. There's not a lot of them, but it's intriguing because there's nothing impossible about it.
Yes, those are very interesting to me, especially when the witness mentions a muzzle, and ears on top of the head. As far as I'm talking, dog man or werewolf or whatever you want to call it.
If I may, dogman is kind of a separate thing because an upright canid isn't possible. And the evolutionary changes are just absolutely gigantic. But if you had a large wolf-like animal, that sometimes reared up, you could scare people.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, I'm kind of on the fence on the dog man. It's to me, it's more possibly on the evil side than a actual physical animal. So
Now,
I
that's
had
another topic.
sure. There was I think it was on Paranormal, caught on camera a few years ago, video of a large, like a large black wolf chasing a pet. It was a dog that was barking. I don't know what state. Have you seen that, Matt?
I think I have, from your description, but I can't bring it to mind.
Yeah, you could hear the owner of the dog hollering,
I'll
"Come
look that up.
here," or "Back," and then this animal gets up on four legs or gets up, stands up from a crouched position, and it is massive compared to the dog. It's hard to determine the distance that the
Mhm.
dog was from this creature, but you could tell it was very large. It's,
I'll look for that.
yeah, very fascinating piece of footage. Matt, at the end of each episode, I do a rapid fire Q&A
Sure.
where I'll ask you three questions. It's casual and the first thing that comes to your mind. You ready?
Go.
All right. Number one, name one thing on your bucket list.
Go look for the creature of Lake Iliamna.
Well, Alaska's on my bucket list, so that's a good one. All right. Number two, if you had one food to eat, camping or hiking, what would it be?
Fried chicken.
Fried chicken. Okay. That's a good choice. All right. Number three, and I think you may have answered this before. Favorite movie?
I think Jaws.
Jaws. Good one. And I just wonder how many times that gets watched during the summertime. There's no telling.
A lot, I'm sure. It was one of those rare cases where the movie's better than the book. The book's not bad, of course, but I thought the movie was almost perfect.
Yeah. Very good movie. Very, very well made, like you said earlier, for that time period as well.
Mhm.
Well, Matt, thank you for coming on the show. I really enjoyed talking with you.
Well, I appreciate it very much. I'm glad to have come on and talk to you.
Yeah, absolutely. If you can, tell everybody where they can find your work.
The easiest is to look for mattbilleauthor.com, just like that, mattbilleauthor.com, because that's my website, and it'll have links to my blog and my books and everything else that is curious about you. I write a blog called the SciTech blog, where I review new books that are of interest, including the major cryptozoological ones. There's accounts there of my adventures at Estes Park Bigfoot Festival and my chats with Mayor and other people. There's a lot there to enjoy.
I'll put a description down at the bottom for everybody to check out your work, and for the cryptozoologist or cryptid lovers, Cryptid Nation, need to check out the book right here of Books and Beasts, a cryptozoologist library. Very fascinating.
Thank you.
A lot of information in it. And but yeah, by the way, that Estes Park Bigfoot Days seemed like to me a fantastic turnout.
That's always fun. I'm a skeptic about Bigfoot, but the phenomenon, is fascinating.
It is, really is. Had a lot of reports. I had a lot of people
Yeah.
come by and stop and share their stories with me. It was a nice trip. Well, Matt, thank you again for coming on. And
Thank you.
yes, and for the
This is
listeners,
great.
yes, absolutely. And for the listeners, if you've had an encounter, something strange or unexplained, send us an email at thecryptidcrewpodcast@gmail.com. Thank you for listening, and God bless.